The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known
Like every day that I see this shit happen and it blows my mind.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as the Mormon Church, is one of the world's biggest hedge funds involved in shady business deals and opaque corporate practices.
In 2019, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had a $100 billion investment fund.
I think that the church has built an empire by deceiving people.
Last month, the Securities and Exchange Commission, an organization normally tasked with stopping insider trading and stock manipulation, fined the Mormon Church $5 million for failure to report stock holdings that they had intentionally spread out over 13 different shell companies to avoid disclosing the church's investments. If it sounds ridiculous that a church would be charged for some of the same crimes as the biggest corporate frauds in history, then sit back.
Nara House, if that happens, then that's honestly the only way that they can beat Trump. The only way that they can beat Trump is if he doesn't run. That's literally the only way they can stop him, which is insane to think about because it's pathetic. It really is pathetic.
Because it gets a lot worse. The Mormon Church collects 10% of their members' incomes as tax-deductible tithes. That means if a Latter-day Saints church member pays a 30% marginal tax rate on a $100,000 income, they automatically give $10,000 of that to the church every year. $7,000 of that donation would have ended up in their bank account, but $3,000 would have gone to the IRS. That means that tight-fisted Uncle Sam is effectively subsidizing 30% of the church's income. The church is not obligated to report how much it brings in every year, but a joint analysis conducted by Reuters and the University of Tampa sociologist Ryan Cragen estimates that the number is at least $7 billion annually in tithes and other donations made by their members.
It's important to note that religions don't pay taxes not because they're charities, but because they're religions. So they have their own kind of code and classification by the IRS that makes it so they do not pay taxes. And it's not because they're charities. So that's an important distinction to make.
Some of that money is used to fund the church's religious activities like paying salaries to priests. Some of the money is spent on maintaining church facilities, and some is spent on programs to help the community. But the Mormon Church consistently has a lot of money left over. The excess money that the church saves every year is funneled into a trust which is managed by the corporation of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The president is both the cultural and managerial leader of the church, and controls the company that controls the trust that controls the church's extra money. The holding company directly—
They just be making money and keeping it. They'll just be collecting money. It'd be crazy to mega churches be like, this year we raised $130 million in tithings. Like, that's a lot of fucking money.
owns an educational division, including Brigham Young University, a think tank called the Intellectual Reserve, and the Polynesian Cultural Center, which is an LDS-controlled tourist destination in Hawaii that was built on the intention to provide employment and scholarships to Mormon students attending the nearby—
The Church of Paper and Politics sounds incredibly real. We could definitely amass a giant congregation and hoard the tax dollars. And it would be legal. So, who gives a fuck? What are you going to do about it? It's legal.
Mormon-owned university. The last major asset owned by the corporation of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is yet another holding company. That is, the corporation of the presiding bishop of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The presiding bishop is kind of like Darth Vader if the president was Palpatine, both very powerful and wield immense authority in the church. But the bishop still answers to the president and is a little more hands-on in the day-to-day affairs of the church. The holding company, owned by a holding company, also owns another holding company called the Deseret Management Corporation, which is their private equity division. The Deseret Management Corporation owns several for-profit companies outright, including Beneficial Financial Group, which is an insurance, investment, and retirement services company, Bonneville International Corporation, which owns radio stations nationwide, and Utah Property Management Associates, which is a real estate company that manages apartments and commercial properties. Church members are encouraged to use the services of these companies, and that gives them a customer base of 16 million without having to pay a penny in advertising. The Bishop's Holding Company also owns agricultural reserves and farmlands, real estate holdings, suburban homes, and the land that the church's temples sit atop. Combined, all of the assets and companies listed so far are worth in excess of $100 billion.
That's so fucking funny, man. Just because, people are people. You feel me? And, man.
But But all of this is still missing one important piece of the church's financial empire. There is an unassumingly named company called Ensign Peak Advisors, which is directly owned by the Bishop's Holding Company. This holding company manages more than $40 billion and is really one of the world's biggest hedge funds. It is also the center of the SEC's recent accusations.
If you sell cheap sweaters like they do across the street at Forever 21, you pay taxes. But if you're selling the invisible product of eternal whatever, no taxes. So to recap, Forever 21, taxes. Forever 33, no taxes.
So it's time to learn how money works to find out how the finances of mega churches really work. This week's lesson was made possible by Raycon. I've been doing a lot of traveling to see family and friends over the past couple of months, but I still need to stay up to speed on your favorite podcasts or music.
Oh, we gonna have to restart the screen. It's all good.
The Church of Jesus
Yeah,
Christ of Latter-day
churches
Saints,
exempt from
commonly
tax.
known as the Mormon Church, is one of the world's biggest hedge funds involved in shady business deals and opaque corporate practices.
In 2019, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had a 100
And trust me when I say that they will not budge. Raycons come with noise isolation and awareness modes. Noise isolation allows me to block outside noise, and noise awareness lets me listen to my music or podcast while also off your Raycon purchase. Ensign Peak Advisors handled the church's investments into publicly listed securities, unlike Deseret Management Corporation, which handles all of the companies that the church owns outright. Ensign Peak Advisors' biggest equity investments are in Apple and Microsoft, but their $40 billion fund has positions in hundreds of companies and securities. The church's hedge fund got into trouble because 2 decades ago, it created 13 holding companies underneath the investing company, underneath the holding company, underneath the holding company, underneath the trust, underneath the church. Ensign spread out its holdings amongst these companies to hide the scale of their financial holdings. The church can get away with not sharing that much about their financials with the government because of the whole church and state thing. That means that the only way that anybody could figure out how much the church really held was through a Form 13F, which is a filing that must be made with the SEC when an institutional investor owns more than $100 million worth of assets under management. 13F filings are public information because it's important for investors to see major shareholders in a company. Anybody with $100 million or more of a company stock could significantly affect its price if they decided to sell suddenly. If a retail investor knows that an institutional investment fund has a very large position in a failing company who transitioned from a social media platform to a conceptual VR company, that might tell some people to avoid investing in it. That's why the SEC makes sure that this is as simple as searching on their website the name of the institutional investor to find the 13F and get a list of all the companies they're invested in. Ensign Peak Advisors didn't want to be on that list because it would reveal the scale of their holdings with a simple Google search, so they spread out their holdings amongst 13 subsidiaries so that they never exceeded $100 million.
And you know, here's the thing about stuff like this, right? You know, it's like so much, all of this takes intention and effort and consistent intention and effort. You know, people don't find themselves in these types of things on accident. But again, the bigger issue is that they're not paying taxes, and they're institutions that are selling like a path of life, a better way forward. They, you know, but we really don't live in a time where people kind of assume that there's some type of man in the sky watching them. Not to say that there's no spiritual reality, but we kind of live in a time where people think bigger of what God is. You know, like people, you know, more people are open to the incomposition of everything and just thinking about the universe at large. We no longer really think about the world and life and spirituality as like the earth and what's above it and below it, you know? So treating religious and spiritual institutions like we still live in those times is beyond unnecessary. These motherfuckers need to be taxed. You know what I'm saying?
Worth of holdings in a single entity and didn't need to make a 13F filing with the SEC. We have a term for this. It's called concealment. If 13F filings were this simple, every hedge fund in the world would do it so that their market moves don't become public knowledge. The church probably thought it could get away with this because it was a church, and to be honest, they really did get away with it.
So anything that a religious entity buys, whether it's a car, travel, anything like that, they pay no sales tax on that.
The SEC fined Ensign Peak Advisors $4 million and the church itself $1 million. Combined, the fines amounted to less than 0.003% of the church's total assets and less than 0.02% of the returns the hedge fund likely would have made in the 4 years the investigation was taking place. The church did apologize, and it acknowledged its wrongdoing, and is now taking steps to comply with the SEC requirements. It also emphasizes in statements that all funds are invested solely to support the church's mission. What this actually means is that because all of these investments, assets, and holding companies on top of holding companies are owned by a church and all profits get distributed back to the church, this entire corporate structure is completely tax-free and can grow unimpeded by the IRS. Since the church can't even spend the money it's making from tithes and donations, this investment portfolio is only going to grow larger and more powerful.
One of the first things a bishop must do to help the needy is ask them to pay their tithing.
The church now has significant voting power in hundreds of companies. Senior executives at companies that have large church ownership could easily be pressured into business decisions that help the church's agenda, which could be anything from conservative business practices to flattering coverage in the media organizations they have a stake in. The Latter-day Saints are not the only church in America to control immense wealth. Eagle Mountain International Church is a non-denominational Christian church founded by Kenneth Copeland, a preacher of the prosperity gospel. Copeland's ministry does not have as many wealthy members as the Mormon Church, but each member is encouraged to give as much as they can, even if it's their last few dollars.
Don't struggle with your rent. Relax. I have a covenant with God.
Eagle Mountain Church does not have a complex corporate structure like the Mormon Church either. It is run more like a family business for the Copelands. The church moved its headquarters in 1998 to a 33-acre estate that was an abandoned Marine Corps air station, which does sound like a weird place for a church, but it was really the airfield that the Copelands were interested in. The church restored the runway and turned it into the Kenneth Copeland Airport, where the church operates its 5 private jets.
Again, getting back to the comment. You said that you don't like to fly commercial because you don't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did.
The estate also includes Copeland's $7
Yo, that
million.
dude is like just creepy as hell and weird as like every time I've ever seen him, it's like there's a delayed reaction going on. It's like something happens in his mind, and then like a second and a half later, his body just does it, and he's like watching it happen. Like there's like in the Men in Black with that little alien that was living inside his body. Like that's what he seemed like. He's just fucking creepy.
Home, which the church owns and gives to the family rent and tax-free as parsonage. If churches have such effective tools to build tax-free wealth, you might be wondering how you can start your very own. John Oliver of Last Week Tonight ran a segment on prosperity gospel churches, including Copeland's, that ended up in him creating his own church to get these sweet tax benefits.
But most of all, praise be to the IRS, that most permissive of government agencies.
This was just a comedy sketch, but it really is that easy, and people really do it.
Not because we have to. We have still not broken any laws by promising you untold riches in return for sending us money.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle.
I never wanted to talk about the Kardashians on this channel.
They do that. Like it's just a straight up scam. People just be sending in mad money, and then they turn around and be like, look at my $80 million mansion that I live in. You can be like this too. Give me your money.
And I have avoided it for as long as possible. But the family's matriarch, Kris Jenner, is the co-founder of the California Community Church, an organization the prominent members of the family have gone on record stating that they give 10% of their income to every year. 10% of Kardashian money is more than enough to keep the lights on in a small local church. The California Community Church has been charged in the past with state tax violations, leading many to assume that the whole thing is just a convenient tax write-off for the wealthy family. Mel Brooks runs the nonprofit foundation AP Riley, which funds the
that's
church.
The best tax write-off ever. Just start a fucking church. If you got mad, if you didn't cross into that 100 million plus mark, just start several churches. That's like the easiest way to just not pay taxes.
The Holy Family, which operates on a heavily guarded 17-acre estate in the Agora Hills of Los Angeles. Over the years, he has donated millions to the church, including, ironically, all of the earnings he has made from his film, The Passion of the Christ. Small churches like these are very hard to find information on, and the IRS deliberately does not ask too many questions. If you are starting to think that a career as a megachurch preacher sounds pretty financially rewarding and might be the right one for you,
We're gonna do this. We're gonna get filthy rich and then we're gonna start some churches. That's what we're gonna do.